I think it's amazing to me when I found Pocket Monsters in Japan, and Nintendo did not want it to leave Japan. They felt it was not going to work outside of and they were very concerned about it. And then when it started to take off, it really took off.
Hey Den of Geek fans, Aaron Sagers here, and I'm in the Den of Geek studios powered by eBay, and we are here as part of our New York Comic-Con coverage. And I am joined right now by some old school nerds, the old school geeks in the Den of Geek, and we're going to nerd out a little bit, but also joined by a legend of the toy and animation world. We got Kahn right here. Hey, Al.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you.
And Scott Mauriello is here with us from Anime Crash and Crash Media.
How are you guys doing?
Very good. Thanks for joining us. And Chris Parente.
Yes, sir. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. That's how your family says it?
They pronounce it Parente. I pronounce it Parente.
Parente.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So I'll go any way you want to.
It's your show. So, guys, first off, I'm just curious. You know, each of you have this established career in the fandom and collectible worlds, but what's the origin story? How did you become the nerds that you are, Al?
Wow, that's a crazy one. I mean, quick, cut to the chase. My father died when I was very young, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life because there was no fatherly figure. And I decided after the Army to go into retail. And I worked for a department store chain, and eventually they put me in the toy department. And I went, this is where everything in the world takes place. Everything in the world is duplicated in the toy department. So I really fell in love with that. And they found out that I had a little bit of maybe ability to pick out pretty good stuff. And they sent me around the world when I was 25 years old. They put me on a plane and said, here's a ticket. It goes one way around the world. Stop off in any country you want. Look for products. And that's how it started. And then after that, I went to another department store company. And then I was hired by Coleco and became head of their toy division. Did that for a while with Cabbage Patch Kids. And then started my own company called 4Kids Entertainment, which then brought in all the anime and all the Pokemon and all the other material. That's a quick synopsis.
Yeah, truly living the dream. I love it. And Chris, actually, I want you to start because your origin kind of dovetails with Scott's as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So I was born in the industry, really. My dad had one of the very first comic book stores in America. My mom had told him what wives were telling husbands from time immemorial, you got to get rid of this stuff. All the stuff that my dad collected forever. So the choice was it got thrown out or he turned it into a business. And he turned it into a business. I grew up in that store. And that was in the 1969 is when he opened it. I met Scott about 6 or 7 years later in the mid-'70s when he was a collector, came into the store. We've been friends ever since and business partners eventually. So it was great. It was you can't beat as a kid growing up in a comic book store.
I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit because how you came into the picture involved, some slate piracy and whatnot, right? You acquired, tell that story.
Well, Chris and I were those weird people in the 70s that actually had VHS machines before anyone else did. His father bought one and I bought one. And I had heard that certain people could get certain things like Star Wars or movies like major films on VHS. And he mentioned he knew someone, and well, I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, so I sold him a bootleg copy of Star Wars in 1978.
I still have it, actually.
Yeah?
Right.
And I've been making him pay for it ever since.
Well, thankfully, I think the statute of limitations has passed, and hopefully Disney and Lucasfilm will not be knocking on anyone's door.
To this, right?
Please,
yeah,
please.
Right? So we're here at New York Comic-Con. What's sort of the goal? What brings you guys to Comic-Con this year, not just as fans, but as professionals? Al?
Well, thank you very much. We are starting a brand new collectible universe called Constellations. I guess the positioning line where stars are born, I guess. And so obviously we are starting out with a major collection of comic books. I've got 1.5 million comic books that go back from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that we've curated. and that we're going to use the expertise that we've established over all these years to try to develop a brand new collectible universe, and we're lucky that eBay is our partner in that regard, along with the Crash Group. So we are going to be doing not only comics, but also a lot of interesting new collectibles that we think are things that haven't been done previously, that are more real, that are more, actually based on something and has a piece in it that may be reality, as opposed to just all the other things that are done that are basically copies of copies of copies of copies. So we're trying to develop this whole real good relationship where we obviously have things I think people will like, and that obviously we hope to build upon that as we go.
Right. And I know you were telling me that it seems like we've got a lot of Bronze Age, Marvel, and DC books in this collection. Guys, I mean, talk a little bit more about this collection and the goal of this. How many millions?
It's $1.5 million. $1.5 million. Yeah. And basically what we found is that many people in the country have collections that they've collected for 50 years and never sold anything.
Yeah.
So my partners, the Gentili brothers, who I wish were here, they found this collector, and we call them the Comic Brothers because they're comic brothers, and they had this incredible collection, and they gave it to us, to help them, sell it. And so we put up the first group this morning on eBay, and we getting bids, and and it's exciting to see it because these are comics that, in some cases, they have the entire set. Like for instance, there are certain comics where you have hundreds of variations of the actual original. They have that in complete set. Mm-hmm. So, how do you sell that? But I mean, those are the kind of things that we're looking for. And of course, with our friends here, the idea of expanding into a multiple, whether it be anime, whether it be manga, whether it be whatever else it might be. So it's really exciting. And I'm here to promote that, with our partners at eBay. And that obviously hope that people will think of us as being a source for interesting collectibles that are fairly priced, that are really well conditioned, and really worth what we're asking for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Al, obviously you're credited a lot with kind of bringing the anime craze stateside, and I want to talk to you more about that. But guys, I want because of Anime Crash, I want you to talk a little bit about the popularity of anime in the States now as you see it, because the game has changed.
Yeah, so when we started, we were really there at the nascent stage in the early 90s when Ghost in the Shell and Akira and Memories and Perfect Blue were the big movies of the time, Macross. And so we watched the evolution from VHS to DVD to streaming, and it just exploded. So it used to be a very niche market, obviously, when it first came to the United States, and now it's completely entrenched in popular culture.
It's almost mainstream now.
Basically. Oh, definitely. I would say it is.
100%.
Costumes, everything, the whole thing.
Well, I think it's the number one selling category, I think, in the world. I mean, we brought it out to the world. We actually took it from Japan initially, and this is going back 30 years ago, and then brought it to the rest of the world. Of course, no one wanted it. That was the other problem. What is this? What is this thing? I remember he only named the name of the head of a major studio, a major network, and he told me if this piece of Dash was for free, I wouldn't air it. And that was Pokemon, and so it was fascinating because it was a brand new thing. It wasn't the traditional animation, and people just didn't understand it. And so we certainly slogged through it, and then who knew that was become the most influential, I think, entertainment vehicle for kids and young adults, especially since it led to the gaming issue as well, all the gamings that come out of that and the video games. And I represented Nintendo for almost 25 years. So we had a lot of information from them in terms of what was going on in Japan as well.
When we started Anime Crash, Chris and I went to banks we opened a chain of stores. We had one in Boston, we had one in Providence, we had one in New York. You went to a bank and said, "Can we borrow money for anime?" And they would look at you and say, "What is that?" Mm-hmm. And so it was all self-financed, and it grew exponentially. Actually, just bum, 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 and that's why everything grew with us.
Look, I mean, I think the thing that's amazing to me when I found Pocket Monsters in Japan, and Nintendo did not want it to leave Japan. They felt it was not going to work outside of and they were very concerned about it. And they said, well, if you want to do it, we want X number of dollars, of course, which is always something they were interested in. And they said that you have to bring it out under your name, under 4Kids Entertainment. We did not want us to be associated with it because we thought it might be a disaster, even though they were going to bring in the video games, right? And we licensed the card game to, Wizards of the Coast. We licensed the toys to Hasbro. No one wanted that stuff. And then when it started to take off, it really took off. And, quick story, when I tried to sell it, we couldn't sell it to networks. We put it in syndication. Put it on 5 o'clock in the morning in 200 markets. And we found out as it went on, and we also, to your point, we made a million VHS tapes about it, and which we didn't have any footage, so we had to guess what this thing was about. We sent it out to the Nintendo mailing list and to the Toys R Us mailing list, and what happened was we get these calls from the networks that had the syndicated blocks saying, hey, this thing is rating better in the morning than it does our block in the afternoon. Make a long story short, we went to syndication 1 year. The second year, Warner Brothers started Warner Brothers Kids. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And they said, we want to make this our lead dog. They signed a $250 million contract with me for the rights.
Yeah, so as I said at the top, animation and toy licensing legend, Cabbage Patch, Pokemon, as you were just saying, the Marvel Toy Biz line. You've had your hands in like so many things. You're really like a collectible prognosticator, a toy psychic, if you will. So looking back at your career, what is the thing that you look at and you're like, yeah, you know what, that may be my proudest moment, or maybe my most uncanny moment of having second sight to say, I think that this thing is going to pop big?
I think the big one was the Cabbage Patch Kids in terms of, everybody thought that was really stupid. I mean, there was nobody that we brought to that. Matter of fact, Toys R Us kicked me out of their office when I brought it to them. They thought it was the dumbest idea they ever saw. They didn't understand that you could make individual dolls and that people had to, look for the one they wanted. They couldn't get it, and they didn't understand couldn't reorder it the way they normally did. But the fascinating thing about that was, at that time there was no internet, there was nothing, right? So when this thing started to blow, and I'm not going to go through all the details. There's a documentary out, you can see it, that talks about it. But we were getting phone calls every day from people that wanted Cabbage Patch Kids. And we get people, like parents, calling up and saying, my daughter's dying of cancer. So I had a rule, if anybody calls up and says their daughter is dying of cancer or a kid, send them a baby doll. Okay. Well, one day, my secretary goes, Nancy Reagan's on the line for you. And I go, sure. Take a message. So that afternoon, I'm looking at the pink slips, and it says Nancy Reagan, and there's a phone number, and it's like a Washington, D.C. number. Call her up. It's Nancy Reagan. She needs 2 Cabbage Patch Kids. And I said, okay. She says, I need them to send them back to Korea because we had open heart surgery. She says, would you send them to him? I said, yes, on one condition. I want to meet your husband. Well, 2 weeks later, I was in the White House with Reagan, and we were working on a project called the Young Astronauts Council with Cabbage Patch Kids. So there's been a crazy amount of stories, but to me, that was the most craziest because it just was so, but Pokemon's now worth $110 billion. But this one was so out of left field, that no one ever thought they would have anything to do with it,
I mean, it's sort of like if you look at a Venn diagram of these major pop culture moments that involve collectibles and animation, it seems like you can always find Kahn in there,
That's not my fault. I didn't think about that. I know I never did. But I think the funny bit about it all is that my most favorite thing in the world is my foundation that I started.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So we had a company called 4Kids Entertainment, and we were based in New York. And the morning of 9/11, I was called I was always involved with law enforcement, and I got a call from the DEA and said there was an accident at the World Trade Center. Do you want to come see it? Sure. They picked me up in a car. We're driving down the East River, and the second plane hits the building, and they realized that this is not an accident. It's a terrorist attack. We were locked down for 7 hours, and then everybody in New York is going, what are you going to do? How do you react to this? And I thought about the fact that since I lost my father when I was really young, I found out 800 children that morning had lost a first responder parent. Out of left field. Imagine say goodbye to your dad or your mom as you're going to work and they don't come back. So I just said, what can I do for these kids? I mean, it was horrible for me when I remember losing a parent. So I got this crazy idea, and I took my car and I drove down the parade route, the Macy's parade route, and there was something called the ESPN zone. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And so I called them up and said, what do you do on Thanksgiving morning we're closed because the parade goes past. They go, good. So I said, how many people can you hold? They said we could hold about 1,200 people. And I called the mayor's office, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't know Giuliani. And I spoke to this guy who was the mayor's general counsel, and I said, what if we put together a breakfast for all the kids who lost a first responder parent for Thanksgiving, and I give them toys, because I can get them toys. I'll pay for the event, and I want you to cordon off 5 blocks where the parade route is so the kids could sit on the curb and watch the parade. And they did it. They did it, and that was 24 years ago. And I realized how much work had to be done with these kids. They didn't have fathers. They didn't have mothers. And to this day, the foundation works with all the first responder organizations in the country, and we work with the FBI, the Secret Service, but the stories are so hideous about what's happening to first responders and their children. So we do mental health programs, we do emergency grants, we do scholarships, we do a Toy Express, of course, right, in 230 markets. And that, to me, is the most important thing that we do.
Yeah. I mean, that's truly the heart of fandom, of I think, all of us that grew up loving, these characters and from the funny books. It's about being heroes, and you are. Like,
I won't go that far. The real heroes are these first responders. I mean, the stories are just unbelievable what they go through. And one quick story. A quick story was we got a call from a Secret Service agent who wanted to help because his son, who had never spoken a word, was being operated on in New York, and they couldn't afford the co-pays, and they couldn't afford to stay in the hospital and that kind of stuff. So we gave him a grant, and and the kid was 3 years old, had never spoken a word. And then the operation was done at Columbia Presbyterian, I remember, and obviously there was a tumor or something that was precluding this. And I ran into him about 2 weeks later, and I said, what happened? He said, well, they operated on him for 7 hours, 8 hours. He came out, I took him out into the recovery room, and he opened his eyes and looked at his mother and went, Mommy. Bang. That's it.
Yeah. That's momentous. That's intense. And, I don't want to, it's such a weird segue here, but as we wrap up, I do want to say, so you're doing incredible work, and you're also unveiling this incredible collection, and we're here at New York Comic Con, but you're not done, because right around the corner we also have Big Apple Con, right? And that's early November. November 23rd. So November 23rd. So let's talk a little bit about what's next beyond New York Comic Con when you head to Big Apple Con. Scott, Chris, why don't you guys weigh in?
Well, we're building a day around Al, basically a day with Al, talking about these type of stories, explaining about his foundation, the people he's dealt with from the Reagans down to everybody. He's going to be signing Pokemon merchandise, cards, and we're going to have him there all day.
All right. And it's a real treat for me to be with you guys. I really appreciate it.
No, we really appreciate it.
And also, I think the other thing, also, eBay was doing an auction for the foundation, which is, I'm hearing it is getting many more things than we've had contributed. I gave a couple of pieces from my own collection, which, hope, and all that money will go to the foundation.
Right.
So that's awesome. It's awesome. And what I'm finding out about this community, which I think you guys are examples of it, I'm getting involved now with all these collectible communities. Like I started VV 5 years ago. I was one of the original guys there with David, and the community is really very anxious to do things that are good. They really are. And I think most collectors have this really innate desire to do good things beside collect. So it's a marriage made in heaven, that those two portions coming together.
Yeah. Well, Al, thank you so much for what you have done professionally, but also what you've done personally as just doing great work with this charity and truly bringing the spirit and the heart of fandom to all these kids and all these families. It is greatly appreciated. And I'm very excited to be checking out more about this collection and the partnership that you guys have with eBay. So we are at New York Comic Con with this guy, the legend Al. Scott and Chris, thank you guys also from Anime Crush. Thanks for joining us. And we are here at New York Comic Con.